everybody, I'm Dave Thomas, and this time I'm building the LOC1 Magnum from LOC Precision. Now these LOC1 series kits are meant to be beginner's kits, but they're based upon the high power kits that LOC Precision makes as well. And so some of that engineering that goes into the high power kits is still reflected in these smaller ones, and I'll show you that here in just a moment. Let's see what's inside, and do save this if you want to see the paint scheme. Okay, so inside here we've got our body tube, and this is pre-slotted for through-the-wall fins, and this is one of the places where the high power engineering goes into this. This is typically found in larger, mid, and high power rockets, and it gives us a really good attachment of the fins, much more so than typical butt-jointed fins like you'd see on something like an Estes Alpha. Okay, motor mount tube there. We have a nylon streamer, a Kevlar shock cord, and a Nomex protector there. Those are also things that we typically see in high power kits. Okay, instead of balsa, this kit uses basswood or basswood fins, so that gives it a stronger structural integrity as well. Okay, and then we've got a small payload section there. Alright, and our nose cone and base. I really like these nose cones too, they're seamless. Now, one of the things I don't like as much about these kits is they often don't come with instructions. You have to go download the instructions from LOC Precision, and even then they use a generic set of instructions for all of their LOC1 kits. Right, and then the last part is this coupler, and in my kit it was actually hiding up inside of here. But since you don't have a parts list that comes with the kit itself, you may forget that it's there. Okay, so it looks like we have everything that we're going to need. I'm going to go download this just so we have a reference during the video. Oh, and I do forget, this is the decals here. These are vinyl decals. We'll cut them apart later. And these are also why you want to hang on to the illustration here so you have some idea where they're supposed to go. I downloaded the instructions from LOC's website, and this is what it looks like. And again, these are pretty generic. They use the same instructions for most of their LOC1 kits. But we will start with the motor mount here. So the first thing to do is we need to measure from one end 1/4 inch. Okay, if you're metrically inclined, that's about 6 millimeters. And then using a hobby knife, make an approximately 1/8 inch slit there. Okay, and then inside the small parts package here, go ahead and remove the engine clip, or what they're calling a tang here. Okay, and the end that has just the 90-degree bend in it, that is going to go into the slot that we just made. So usually that will just kind of pop in there. If it's not going in readily, just enlarge your slot a little bit. Okay, so it should look like this. And then you're going to need the two centering rings here. Alright, now note that they don't give you any type of measurement here. Okay, so I'm going to start out by dry fitting these and putting one just over the end of the motor mount there, and it looks like they're going pretty close to the aft end of the motor mount there. I'm going to move that up so it's about 1/4 inch. Okay, and then what we want to do is take the body tube okay, and first I'm just going to compare this on the side. So when we actually do mount this, the motor mount tube is going to be even with the aft end there. And the main thing here is we can't have anything interfering with our fin slot. So that looks like it's going to be too far forward. I'm going to go ahead and back this off again and put it flush. And I'm going to dry fit that. Okay, so if we look at that there, we can go up just a little bit. Now we'll try and dry fit this, but a lot of times it pushes the rings forward. Alright, so if I make that flush, okay, what I'm looking for here is to make sure I can't see the ring in the slot there. Now I would prefer a little bit more room so that this will bend more readily. Alright, so that's right at the edge there. Okay, so that's going to be our configuration for the motor mount. And then the other thing that will go in here will be the engine block or thrust ring, and that's just going to go right on the end there and butt up against the clip. Okay, so I still got no glue on here, but this is how it's going to look. And so now we'll go ahead and glue everything into place. So now that I've got this dry fit to the appropriate size here, I'm going to go ahead and glue everything in place. So here just use some wood glue or some white glue. And so here on the forward centering ring, I'm just going to scoot it back a little bit. Alright, put a nice bead of glue around there and just slide it forward once more. And then I'm going to smooth that in. And then the excess glue I'll apply as a fillet on the back side of the ring there. Just like that. Okay, and then on my engine block, now here there's not a lot of room in there, and I don't want to get glue down inside the engine mount itself. So in this case I'm going to apply the glue to the ring. So get a nice smooth amount all the way around it there. And then just place that inside. And that way the excess glue ends up on the top and not down inside of it. Now for the lower ring, one of the things that's going to happen here is there's not a lot of play involved there, and you can really bend that and get it out of the way. But I want this to move a little bit more. And so what I can do here is I'm just going to cut a notch about halfway into the thickness of this, and wide enough for the clip to go through. Okay, and then we're just going to cut out some of that cardboard there. Okay, and you can just keep doing this in layers. You don't have to, so this is optional. I just like to have a little bit more play in that clip, so it makes it easier to change the motor. Okay, so now my ring looks like this. I'm going to go ahead and fit that back on here. All right, and so now when I pull this, I've got a little bit more room there. Okay, and now I'm just going to do the same thing I did with the forward ring. Okay, but I'm going to make sure I don't get glue on the clip itself. So I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap there. Okay, I'm going to put that back as well. So that needed to be really close to the edge. All right, and once again, fill in the glue. The excess can go on the inside of the ring there. All right, and if you get anything on the rings themselves, make sure you wipe that off. Okay. Now this needs to dry completely before we put it into the rocket body tube. While my motor mount is drying, we can skip ahead a little bit here and assemble the payload bay. And so for that we're going to need this bulkhead, and there's also a little screw eye in there. And then we'll need the actual payload bay tube here and the coupler. There we go. Okay, so the first thing to do is to attach the screw eye to the bulkhead here, and then this bulkhead is going to be attached to the coupler here. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is just dry fit this, and it's just a little bit tight. So now I'm just going to take a little bit of I think this is 100 grit sandpaper here, and just use that to sand a little bit off the edge here. Put this in the coupler here, alright. That gives us a better fit, nice and snug. Okay, so now we're just going to apply a little bit of glue to the hole right here. Okay. And then apply the screw eye to that. So I'm going to screw this in just until the threads here reach the face of the bulkhead there. Okay, and so here the other end of the screw is just coming out, and I'm just going to cover that with a little bit of glue as well. Okay, and now I'm going to apply glue just to the inside edge there. You can be fairly generous with this because this is going to be a tension point when that ejection charge goes off. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of rotate around in there, and we're going to squish that in. Okay, I've gotten it a bit far, but I can push it back out. So what I want to do is have this almost flush with the edge of the coupler. Okay, and then that can dry for a few minutes. It doesn't take a very long time because as we manipulate this, we won't be pulling on this part here. And so the next thing we're going to do is make a mark in the center of it. Okay, so this is 2 inches long. So we're just going to make a little mark here at 1 inch. And this is going to slide in here. Now if you look down inside there, there's not a lot of room. Okay, so you're not going to be able to fly an astronaut in there. Well, you can put something small like an altimeter in. And since this part is hollow, it does give you some additional space as well. So now I'm just going to put another bead of glue in here. Okay, I'm just going to spread that around. And now I'm going to insert the coupler here until we reach that mark. Okay, and then that can dry. For the nose cone, we'll need an even bead of plastic model cement. You do want it to be coated thoroughly, but don't use so much that it pools and creates soft spots in the plastic. So just enough to go around there. And we'll put on the base and give it a couple of turns back and forth to seat it. Hold that for a few seconds, because sometimes the volatile solvents in there can cause it to push out. Okay, and that looks pretty good. And this also can be set aside to finish drying. While we're waiting for the motor mount, we can move ahead a little bit here. And this shows gluing the launch lug on after putting the fins on, but they don't really show you where to do it. Okay, so they're just kind of expecting you to put it above the fins and kind of in the middle there. So what I would recommend is, first of all, finding a spot here halfway in between two fins and just make a mark. And then take that either to a door frame or use a marking guide like this one. And then go ahead and draw a line up from there. And I would just go ahead and draw it all the way up the length of the body tube, because that will give you an easier sight line to work with. Okay, and then I'm just going to put this up about at 5 centimeters or about 2 inches here. I'll just make a little tick mark there. Okay, so I'll put my launch lug right about there. And I'm going to take some sandpaper here and just roughen that up a little bit. Just take the gloss off. It gives a better gluing surface. If you want, you can do that along the fin slots too. It doesn't take a lot. Just give a couple of strokes along those fin slots, and that'll give your glue fillets a greater hold as well. Okay, the glue on my mount is mostly dry and dry enough to work with. Alright, now before we put this inside, we need to attach the shock cord. The shock cord is down in the same package as the streamer and the shock cord protector, or the streamer protector. Just carefully open that up. Okay, so here's our Kevlar shock cord. Alright, and what we're going to do here is this is going to tie around our motor mount, kind of like this, and then extend up through the body tube. So this gives us a really good anchor point. So to do that, you can do it in a couple of ways. What I prefer to do personally is first tie a loop in this, as small as you can make it, and that'll depend in part on how thick your fingers are. Okay, just a loop like that is good. And then I'm going to pass the other end through that loop. That gives me kind of a lasso there. And now I'm going to take my lasso and wrap that around and just go ahead and tighten that down right along there. And then I'm going to glue that in place. Okay, so I'm going to keep the rest of the shock cord pulled up. All right, everything else is going around that way. So now I'm just going to take a fillet of glue and run that around and just completely embed that shock cord into glue. Just like that. Now again, if we get it up on the surface of the ring, we want to take that off. And so I'm going to just set this aside once again to let that glue dry. Here the glue for the shock cord has completely dried, and now I'm about ready to put this into the body tube. And the first thing I'm going to do is simply coil up the shock cord like this, and I'm going to put this into the motor mount. And this way I have less chance of getting glue all over the shock cord if I were to try and pass it up through the body tube. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is put a ring of glue just beyond the slots here, and then this will go in like this. Okay, and the hard part here is going to be getting that first bit of shock cord past there. Okay. Now if you're having trouble fitting this, one of the other things you can do is take your knife and cut a notch in the centering ring where it's going to go up. Okay. You don't have to do this if you can get this to seat itself properly without putting a notch in it. That's just fine. Okay, but that just gets a little more clearance there. And if you continue to have trouble with this, either coiling up or falling out, you can just pull the cord all the way through and out the back, and that way you can keep tension on that. So whichever way works for you. Okay, so this is going to go inside, and when we're finished, the two tubes should be flush. Alright, so I'm going to get my wood glue here, and I'm going to use a cotton applicator. Okay, I'm just going to stick that in until I'm just past the slots and run that around. Okay, and then here I'm going to go ahead and keep tension on mine. And one of the other things I prefer to do is have my engine clip on the same side as my launch lug. So I'm going to align that here. Okay, I'm going to push that in. Now right here you can see my forward centering ring is right there in the slot, and that's about where I want it. And now I'm going to take my glue again, and I'll put another band of glue just on the edge of the body tube. And if you get it on the motor mount, it won't hurt anything. Just try not to get too much there. Okay, and now, making sure my alignment's good, I've got tension on my shock cord, and I'm just going to push the whole thing in, and both rings now have their own glue. Alright, and just push that till it is flush. Okay, and then just the shock cord can hang out. And this will bind fairly quickly, so I'm just going to let it sit for a few minutes, and then I'm going to come back and work on the fins. So here are my fins, and originally I thought these were basswood. It turns out they're actually very thin plywood, which means having the grain not going parallel with the leading edge is not that big of a deal. And so the first thing I'm going to do is use some 150 grit sandpaper. And I'm just going to sand the faces here. And I'm sanding with the grain. flip that over, do the same thing on the other side. Okay, and then I'm just going to briefly sand the edges here, just to remove some of that soot. Okay, and I don't know if this was actually incorporated into the design or if it was an error in cutting, but these two fins have this little bit of a drop down here at the edge, but the third one does not, so I'm guessing maybe this was a little bit of an error in cutting. Okay, I'm just going to ignore it. But the other thing you're going to want to do here at minimum, and you don't have to, but if you want decent performance, is go ahead and round off the leading edge here. And I'm going to start just by rounding off the corner edges on each side. Okay, and I'm just going to go back and forth here with a rounding motion. And then look in cross section to make sure that I am even. Okay, and again, this little drop here, you can try and round that as well. Trying to do it separately may be a bit of a pain here, but let's see what we can do. And basically this will be done when you don't see any more soot along the middle there. And just keep going to each side. Okay, and then I'm going to check again in cross section, so I'm a little more rounded on this side. So I'll just do the other side a bit more. Okay, that's pretty good. Now you may want to consider putting some wood filler or sanding sealer to fill the grain here. This has actually got a fairly coarse grain to it. Usually the plywoods are a bit tighter. Okay, so you could use a polyurethane sealer, you could use wood filler, you could even use plastic model cement, or you can just leave it alone and have the wood grain if that doesn't bother you. You can also use a filling primer on this. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and use some polyurethane based sanding sealer on it. And so off camera I'm going to finish my sanding and then we'll come back and apply the sanding sealer. Okay, I have my fins sanded, and before I go on to the next step of sealing them, I want to make sure that they do actually fit in the slots. Okay, and it looks like I got my centering ring there just a little bit high. Now that's not a big deal. Okay, but yeah, it is going to make my fin tabs not quite fit right. This is easily fixed either by using a small file like this, or you can even use some medium or even coarse sandpaper just to knock a little bit more off this. So in this case, I'm just going to file a little bit down here. Okay, and that's just enough to let that fit. Okay, I want to check it with the other ones as well. Okay, snug but it fits. And then here, oops. Okay, also snug but fits. So those are all good there. If you want to make them more uniform, you can, so that one of them doesn't stick out a little bit more than the other or something like that. Okay, but that looks pretty good. So to apply the sanding sealer here, I found it's a good idea to have a cardboard edge. put this off to the side. But the holes of the corrugated cardboard are good for holding the fins while you're doing this. And here I'm going to take a sewing pin, and I'm just going to push that a little bit into the root edge. Doesn't have to go very far, and be careful that you don't poke a finger or something with that. And I'm just going to use a cotton applicator to apply the sanding sealer to the fin. You can also use a disposable paintbrush, but it gets kind of expensive after a while. Okay, and so here I'm just going to fairly generously apply this. Now if you can, try to avoid getting it down onto the fin tab itself. If you do, it's not a big deal. We just need to do a little more sanding. Okay, so I'm just going to coat one side here. Same with the root edge. I keep catching it there. But it's going to be best if it is not been sealed. Now I only rounded off the leading edge. If you want to do a full airfoil on these, that's going to work just fine. So you can round the leading edge and taper the trailing edge. You don't want this dripping, but otherwise you do want to be pretty generous with the sanding sealer there. Okay, and once you've got it all coated, then you simply take the pin and slide it into one of the corrugations there, and that will allow it to dry without drying onto a surface. So I'm going to do the same thing with the other two fins off camera, and then we'll come back. I've resanded my fins after applying sanding sealer to them, and they may not look that different, and that's because most of the sanding sealer gets sanded off again, and the only thing left behind is down in the grain. Now if you want an even smoother finish, you can repeat this process one or more times and get smoother and smoother fins. But eventually you reach the point where the trade-off in work versus finish becomes negligible. Alright, so I'm going to leave it the way it is there, and we are ready to mount the fins onto the body tube. So I'm going to take my wood glue here. If you don't have wood glue, white glue works as well. And so here I'm going to run, that's a lot of glue. Okay, so I want to, not quite that much glue on there. I want a nice even coating. Okay, and the strength of this comes mainly from the fact that most of this is gluing onto the motor mount and not to the body tube. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put that in there. And here my usual trick of pulling it back off to allow the glue to get tacky really isn't needed, because the slots themselves help hold the fin in place. Okay, I do recommend waiting a few minutes in between the fins just to let the glue set up a little bit. And then once that has happened, you can go ahead and do the next two fins. I'm going to do those off camera. All of my fins are glued on, and I've pulled the shock cord back out toward the front, so it's in the position it's supposed to be. Next I'm going to attach the launch lug here in the little area that I had sanded earlier. So here I will just apply a bead of glue. And that'll go right there. Okay, I just need to make sure that is straight and aligned with our line here. Okay, and then this just needs to dry for a few minutes, and then I'll come back and we'll put fillets on all the way around. For the fillets, I'm just going to use more of the wood glue here and apply bead of glue right on the inside edge of each fin. And if you're using a fairly thick wood glue, you can just start by doing this all the way around. And then you want to have a paper towel or a rag handy. Okay, and I'm just going to smooth these in with my finger and just wipe off the excess. Okay, and then do the same thing for the launch lug. Alright, and then just let the whole thing dry in a horizontal position so the glue doesn't run to one end or the other. While the fillets are drying, we may want to start thinking about the finishing touches here. And if we go by the color scheme shown on the package, that has a red nose and red fin can there, and then black for the rest of the body. Now note something here, this is showing a lot more decals than what come with it. And so these two stripes go here and here, but this large area here and these two are not included in this kit. So I'm not sure if this was an old illustration or if another set of decals was supposed to be included in here. Could be either one. But if you're going to go with this plan or something similar to it, you'll want to paint the nose cone ahead of time. It's going to be easier to do that than trying to do it all assembled. And you might also want to consider if you want to paint your payload section a different color than what's shown here. Okay, so that's up to you, but something to think about. So if you want to do this part of the rocket a different color, now's a good time to do that while you're waiting for your fillets to dry. My fillets are still drying, but they are dry enough that we can do the last structural step here. And so I'm going to pop my shot cord back out and just set the rest of the rocket aside there. And so here we have the streamer and some reusable wadding. This is just a small sheet of Nomex. And so pass the shot cord through that. Okay, and then do the same thing with the streamer. So one end of this streamer has a little notch cut in it. Okay, and then the last thing to do would be to tie this onto the screw eye on the payload section. My payload section right now has primer on it, and so I can't do that, and I wouldn't anyway. I would wait and finish painting the rest of the model. Okay, but the way this works now is that when you're ready to fly, you simply fold up the streamer on itself here like this, and you kind of roll the last bit, and then that Nomex just kind of fold up over it, and then the whole thing fits in like that. And so you don't need to have disposable recovery wadding for this. Alright, I'll come back when the fillets are completely dry and we'll paint the rest of the rocket. I have my rocket painted, and I decided to go with a color scheme here with a red payload section and nose. And then I used some color shift paint here over a black base coat for the rocket body itself. So now the only thing left are the decals here. Now these decals are self-adhesive vinyl, and you can simply cut them out and apply them directly. But here I've got a small basin of water here, and I've added just 1 drop of dishwashing liquid to it. And so what this will allow me to do is reposition the decal easier if I need to. So here I'm just going to really quickly just give a coating of water to the adhesive here. And you can only do this if you've got a well-painted rocket. You got to make sure the rocket seals the entire body tube. Okay, and I'm going to place this decal right here at the edge of the body tube. But you notice I can lift this really easily and reposition it, and that's the advantage to using this method. Okay, so I can just bring this all the way around. Alright, and once I've got it straight, then you just kind of squeegee everything off here with a tissue. Okay, so here we're just pushing all the water out, and any remaining dish detergent there will be negligible. Now look here, it's kind of lifting up a little. That's okay. Once the water fully dries, the adhesive will become sticky again, and then you can finish pushing that down. Okay, I'm going to do the rest of the decals off camera here, and I'll come back when they're done. Here I have my decals applied, and it'll take about 48 hours for the adhesive to regain its maximum adhesion. So keep that in mind if you're going to fly this right away or something like that. Also, if you intend to put a clear coat over this, wait 48 hours as well. My last step is something I had put off for a while here, and that is to connect the shock cord to the eyelet here on the payload bay. Alright, so I'm just going to put double knot or 2 half hitches there, and then I'm going to trim this so that it's short enough that it will not get up in between the body tube and the coupler there. And then as a final touch, I'm going to put a little bit of super glue here right on that knot, just to keep it from coming undone, and a little bit also on that free end of the knot, coming off the knot there, so it does not fray. Okay, and that is it. This is my Magnum. Hope you had a good time building and finishing yours, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.